The champagne cork pops with a sound that feels like a gunshot in my chest. My sister Emma squeals, bouncing on her toes as our parents beam at her from across the driveway. Behind them sits a gleaming white Tesla Model S, complete with an enormous red bow that probably costs more than most people spend on groceries in a month. Meanwhile, I clutch a $20 Target gift card in my sweaty palm, the plastic edges digging into my skin. $20 for my college graduation. The same graduation where I earned summa cum laude honors in engineering while working 2 jobs to pay my own way through school. But let me back up a bit, because this story didn't start with champagne and luxury cars. This story started 23 years ago when I was born exactly 18 months after my sister. And from that moment forward, I learned what it meant to live in someone else's shadow. Growing up in the Morrison household meant understanding an unspoken hierarchy. Emma was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the princess who deserved the world handed to her on a silver platter. I was the responsible one, the backup plan, the child who should be grateful for whatever scraps fell from the family table. You might think I'm exaggerating. Trust me, I wish I were. But the evidence spans decades, documented in family photos where Emma takes center stage while I hover at the edges, captured in birthday parties where her celebrations lasted for weeks, while mine were forgotten entirely, preserved in Christmas mornings where her pile of gifts towered over my modest collection. Take my 16th birthday, for instance. The day I'd been dreaming about since I was 12, counting down the months until I could finally get my driver's license and taste that first real freedom. I'd saved every penny from my part-time job at the local coffee shop, enough to contribute toward insurance and gas for whatever used car my parents might help me find. Instead, I spent my 16th birthday at Emma's soccer tournament 3 hours away. My parents had completely forgotten about my birthday until we were already in the car, and even then, their apology came with a promise we'd celebrate when we got back. We never did. 6 months later, Emma turned 16. The party lasted 3 days. The car, a brand new Honda Civic, sat in our driveway with a bow bigger than my entire birthday cake had been. When I asked why Emma got a new car when I hadn't gotten anything, my mother looked at me with genuine confusion. Emma needs reliable transportation for her activities, she said, as if I didn't have a job to get to, as if I didn't have college applications to submit at the library because our home computer was always occupied with Emma's homework. But this isn't just about cars or birthday parties or forgotten celebrations. This is about a pattern so deeply ingrained in my family that they can't even see it anymore. A pattern that taught me my worth was always secondary, always conditional, always less than my sister's inherent value. In high school, when I made the honor roll 6 semesters in a row, the certificates went into a drawer. When Emma made JV soccer as a sophomore, they threw a dinner party and invited the neighbors. When I got accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, my parents nodded approvingly and asked if I'd help Emma with her college applications. When Emma got accepted to a community college with no scholarship money, they cried tears of joy and immediately started planning her dorm room decorations. The message was crystal clear. Emma's achievements mattered. Mine were expected. College became my refuge. 4 blissful years where I could exist without constant comparison, where my accomplishments stood on their own merit. I threw myself into my studies with the determination of someone who finally had something to prove, not to my family, but to myself. I graduated with a 3.97 GPA, landed a job at a prestigious engineering firm before I even walked across the stage, and felt for the first time in my life like I might actually matter. Like maybe, just maybe, my parents would finally see me as more than Emma's responsible older sister. The graduation ceremony was beautiful. Spring sunshine, proud families cheering from the bleachers, the weight of my achievements finally feeling real as I walked across that stage. My parents attended, which felt like a small miracle in itself, considering they'd missed my high school graduation for Emma's state soccer tournament. After the ceremony, we went to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. I was practically glowing with pride, sharing stories about my new job, talking about my plans for the future, feeling like I was finally having the kind of family moment I dreamed about for years. That's when my mother reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "For you?" she said, with a smile that seemed genuine. "Congratulations on your graduation." Inside was the $20 Target gift card. I stared at it for a long moment, certain there had to be more. Maybe this was just the beginning. Maybe the real gift was waiting at home. But my father was already asking for the check, and my mother was already talking about Emma's upcoming spring break trip to Cancun. $20. For 4 years of academic excellence, for landing my dream job, for achieving everything they'd always said they wanted for their children. The drive home was silent, my mind racing with calculations I didn't want to make. Emma's spring break trip, $8,000. The new MacBook they'd bought her for starting community college, $2,000. The monthly allowance she still received at 19, $300. My graduation gift, $20. But the real wake-up call came 3 weeks later, on what should have been an ordinary Tuesday. I'd just finished my first week at my new job, finally feeling like my adult life was beginning, when my phone rang with a group video call from my family. "We have something exciting to share," my mother announced, her face glowing with the kind of joy I'd only seen her display for Emma's achievements. That's when I saw the car. Not just any car, but a Tesla Model S, gleaming white with all the premium features, sitting in our family driveway like it had always belonged there. The price tag, I later learned, was just over $200,000. Emma appeared on screen, keys dangling from her manicured fingers, tears of joy streaming down her face. "It's for finishing my associate degree," she explained between sobs, "and for getting into State University as a transfer student. The same state university where I'd completed my entire bachelor's degree. The same degree that had earned me a $20 gift card." My parents took turns explaining their reasoning. Emma needed reliable transportation for her new apartment near campus. She deserved something special for working so hard to get her grades up. They wanted to invest in her future success. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emma was transferring to state as a junior with a 2.8 GPA, while I'd graduated with highest honors and a job offer. But somehow, her achievement warranted a car worth more than most people's houses, while mine had merited a gift card I could use to buy cleaning supplies. As I listened to their excited chatter about Emma's bright future, something inside me finally cracked. Not broke, exactly, but cracked open to reveal a truth I'd been hiding from myself for 23 years. I didn't matter to them, not really. I was the dependable daughter, the one who didn't need special attention or expensive gifts because I was strong enough to succeed on my own. Emma was the precious one, the one who needed constant support and celebration and financial backing to reach her potential. The call ended with promises to celebrate Emma's achievement properly when I could visit home. I set down my phone and looked around my tiny studio apartment, furnished with secondhand finds and DIY projects, paid for entirely with my own money. For the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never allowed myself to feel toward my family. Anger. Pure, white-hot anger that burned away years of making excuses for their favoritism, of telling myself that love comes in different forms, of convincing myself that I was better off being the independent one. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I made a list. Every birthday they'd forgotten or minimized, every achievement they'd dismissed or overshadowed, every time they'd chosen Emma's wants over my needs, every dollar they'd spent on her comfort while I worked multiple jobs to pay for my own necessities. The numbers were staggering. Conservative estimates put their investment in Emma's life at over $300,000 beyond basic necessities. My total, maybe $5,000, and that was being generous. But this isn't really about money. Money is just the scoreboard in a game where I never knew I was playing. This is about worth, about value, about what it means to be seen and loved and prioritized by the people who are supposed to care about you most. As I sat in my apartment that night, surrounded by the evidence of my own hard work and determination, I realized something profound. I'd been playing by their rules my entire life, accepting their version of what I deserved, believing their narrative about who mattered in our family. But their narrative was wrong, and I was done living by it. The Tesla incident wasn't just favoritism taken to an extreme. It was a revelation, a moment of clarity that showed me exactly where I stood in my family's hierarchy. And for the first time in my life, I decided I didn't want to stand there anymore. Because here's the thing about being the forgotten daughter, the one who's expected to be grateful for scraps. Eventually, you realize that you're not actually invisible. You're just choosing to be unseen. And once you understand that distinction, everything changes. What happened next would test every relationship in my family, force conversations that had been avoided for decades, and ultimately show me what it really means to know your own worth. But first, I had to figure out exactly what that worth was, and whether the people who raised me would ever be capable of seeing it. The answer would surprise all of us. The Monday morning after the Tesla revelation, I walked into my engineering firm with a new sense of clarity. My coworkers congratulated me on projects, my boss praised my innovative solutions, and clients specifically requested me for their accounts. Here, in this glass office building 40 miles from my childhood home, I was valued. My contributions mattered. My ideas were heard. The contrast hit me like a physical blow. I spent my lunch break researching something I'd never thought to investigate before. The actual cost of Emma's lifestyle. Not just the obvious expenses like the Tesla, but everything. Her private high school tuition when she claimed public school was too stressful. The summer camps that cost more than most people's cars. The college application consultant who charged $5,000 to help her craft essays about overcoming adversity. What adversity, I wondered, scrolling through old family photos on social media. The adversity of having everything handed to you? By Thursday, I'd compiled a spreadsheet. Yes, a literal spreadsheet, because that's what engineers do when they want to understand a problem. Column A, Emma's expenses. Column B, my expenses. Column C, the difference. The numbers told a story more damning than I'd imagined. Emma's Sweet 16 party, $12,000 for a venue, catering, and a DJ. My Sweet 16, a grocery store cake, and dinner at Applebee's. Total cost maybe $60. Emma's college dorm setup, $4,000 in furniture, decorations, and a mini fridge that cost more than my monthly rent. My college dorm setup, whatever fit in 2 suitcases, and a budget of $200 I'd saved from my summer job. Emma's spring break trips. Cancun, Bahamas, Miami, averaging $6,000 per trip over 4 years. My spring breaks, working double shifts at the campus bookstore to afford next semester's textbooks. But the most telling number was the one I calculated last. Total parental investment per child from birth to present. Emma, $437,000. Me, $18,000. And that included the car insurance on a vehicle I'd purchased myself. I stared at that final calculation until my eyes burned. Nearly $500,000. The difference between their investment in Emma versus their investment in me could have bought a house, could have eliminated my student loans entirely, could have given me the kind of financial foundation that would have changed the entire trajectory of my adult life. Instead, I was sitting in a studio apartment, eating ramen noodles, while calculating whether I could afford both groceries and gas this week, all while my sister posted Instagram stories from her luxury apartment near campus, the one my parents were paying for because Emma needed to focus on her studies without the distraction of a part-time job. That weekend, something shifted. Instead of driving home for our usual family dinner, I stayed in my apartment. When my mother called to ask where I was, I gave her an excuse about work deadlines. It wasn't entirely untrue. I was working, Just not on engineering projects. I was working on understanding my own worth. Sunday evening, Emma called. "We need to talk," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone she'd perfected over the years. The one that suggested I was being unreasonable about something. "About what?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. "Mom says you're upset about my car." She paused, waiting for me to fill the silence with reassurance, the way I always had. When I didn't, she continued. "Look, I know it seems like a lot, but I really needed reliable transportation, and you're already established in your career. You don't need help the way I do." There it was, the family narrative in its purest form. Emma needed help. I was already established, as if my success had happened magically, without struggle, without sacrifice, without the kind of support they'd lavished on her for 23 years. "Emma," I said carefully, "do you know how much money Mom and Dad have spent on you over the years?" "What kind of question is that?" She sounded genuinely confused. "There are parents. Parents spend money on their kids. Do you know how much they've spent on me?" Silence. "I'm not trying to start a fight," I continued. "I'm just trying to understand why there's such a massive difference in how they treat us." "You've always been jealous," Emma said, her voice hardening. "Ever since we were kids. You can't stand that I got nice things, so you have to make everything about you." The accusation landed exactly where she'd aimed it, hitting the bruise I'd carried since childhood. The fear that maybe I was just bitter, just envious, just unable to be happy for my sister's success. But this time, instead of absorbing the blow and apologizing, I did something different. I thought about the spreadsheet, about the concrete evidence I'd gathered, about 23 years of documented favoritism that couldn't be explained away by jealousy or sisterly rivalry. "Emma," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I've never been jealous of your success. I've been hurt by the inequality of our treatment. There's a difference." She hung up. The next few days passed in a strange calm. No calls from my parents asking why I'd missed dinner. No texts from Emma trying to smooth things over. It was as if my absence had gone completely unnoticed, which somehow hurt more than their anger would have. By the following Friday, I'd made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. I was going to confront this directly, lay all my cards on the table, and finally have the conversation our family had been avoiding for decades. I called my mother and asked if we could meet for coffee, just the two of us. Something in my tone must have conveyed the seriousness of my request, because she agreed without her usual deflections or suggestions to include Emma. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, the kind of place where serious conversations happen. My mother arrived first, already nursing a latte and checking her phone. She looked up when I approached, and for just a moment, I saw something like wariness in her eyes. "Honey," she said as I sat down, "is everything okay? You've seemed distant lately." I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head dozens of times, but sitting across from the woman who'd raised me, seeing the genuine concern in her expression, all my carefully planned words evaporated. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed her the spreadsheet. "Mom," I said quietly, "I need you to help me understand something." She squinted at the screen, her expression shifting from concern to confusion to something that might have been recognition. "What is this?" "It's a comparison of how much money you and Dad have invested in Emma versus how much you've invested in me over the years." Her face went pale. "Honey, you can't quantify love with money." "I'm not trying to quantify love," I replied. "I'm trying to understand why there's such a massive disparity in how you treat your daughters." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the numbers on my phone. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Emma has always needed more support, and I needed less? You've always been so capable, so independent. We knew you'd be fine no matter what." There it was again. The narrative that had shaped my entire childhood. I was fine, I was capable, I was strong enough to succeed without help. Emma was fragile, needed support, deserved investment. "But Mom," I said, leaning forward, "what if I wasn't fine? What if I needed support too, but I learned not to ask for it because I watched what happened when Emma asked versus when I asked?" She looked up at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something crack in her expression. What do you mean? I mean that when Emma struggled with math, you hired a tutor. When I struggled with math, you told me to work harder. When Emma wanted to quit soccer because it was too stressful, you found her a sports psychologist. When I wanted to quit my job because I was overwhelmed with school and work, you told me that responsibility builds character. My mother's hands trembled slightly around her coffee cup. When Emma needed a car for college, you bought her a Tesla. When I graduated college with highest honors, you gave me a $20 gift card. The words hung between us, years of accumulated hurt finally given voice. I wasn't yelling or crying or making a scene. I was simply stating facts, letting the truth speak for itself. My mother was crying now, quiet tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. I never realized, she whispered. I never saw it that way. But that's just it, Mom. You never saw me at all. The silence stretched between us like a chasm 23 years in the making. My mother sat frozen, her coffee growing cold as tears traced paths down her carefully applied makeup. Around us, the cafe hummed with normal conversations, people discussing work deadlines and weekend plans, oblivious to the family reckoning happening at table 12. I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow, like I'd finally spoken a truth that had been poisoning me from the inside, only to discover that speaking it didn't magically heal the wound. Mom finally looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and searching. What do you want me to say, Sarah? That we were terrible parents? That we failed you? I want you to acknowledge what happened, I said quietly. I want you to see that your choices had consequences, that they shaped who I became and how I see myself in this family. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. You turned out so well, though. Look at you. You have a great job, your own apartment. You're successful and independent. I pulled my hand away. Mom, do you hear yourself? You're using my success as proof that neglecting me was the right choice. That's not how parenting works. We didn't neglect you. The denial hit me like a slap. After everything I'd just shown her, the spreadsheet, the documented evidence, she was still defending their choices. Okay, I said, standing up. Let me ask you something different. When was my last birthday? She blinked, caught off guard by the question. Your birthday? It's in... She trailed off, her face going pale. It was 3 weeks ago, Mom, the day after Emma got her Tesla. I spent it alone in my apartment because nobody remembered. But we were so busy with Emma's celebration and there it is, I interrupted. Emma's celebration was more important than my existence. Again, I gathered my purse, my phone, the evidence of a lifetime of being second choice. My mother sat staring at me, looking smaller somehow, as if the weight of her realizations was physically pressing her down. Sarah, please don't leave like this. I'm not leaving like this, Mom. I'm leaving like me, the daughter you never bothered to see. The drive home blurred past in a haze of emotions I couldn't name. Relief, anger, sadness, and something else, something that felt almost like freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I told my mother exactly how her choices had affected me. No sugarcoating, no making excuses for her behavior, no protecting her feelings at the expense of my own truth. My phone started ringing before I'd even reached my apartment. First Emma, then my father, then Emma again. I let them all go to voicemail. When I finally listened to the messages hours later, the pattern was exactly what I'd expected. Emma was furious, accusing me of attacking Mom and making everything about myself. My father was coldly disappointed, suggesting I was being dramatic and ungrateful. Both messages ended with demands that I call them back immediately to apologize. The old Sarah would have done exactly that, would have called back with tears and apologies, would have minimized her own feelings to preserve family peace, would have found a way to make their discomfort her fault. Instead, I ordered Chinese takeout, opened a bottle of wine, and spent the evening doing something I'd never done before. I looked through old family photos with new eyes, seeing patterns I'd been too close to recognize. There was Emma's 8th birthday party, a princess theme, complete with a hired character and a cake that must have cost more than some people spend on groceries in a month. In the background of one photo, barely visible, was a small pile of gifts on a side table. Those were mine. My 9th birthday had been the day before, celebrated with a grocery store cake and gifts that were clearly afterthoughts. I'd been so young then, so eager to please, so willing to believe that Emma deserved more because she was somehow more special. Looking at that little girl in the background of her sister's party, I felt a grief so profound it took my breath away. I grieved for the child who learned to ask for less because asking for more was met with sighs and eye rolls. For the teenager who worked while her sister played because someone had to be responsible. For the young adult who celebrated her achievements alone because her family was too busy managing Emma's latest crisis to notice. But mostly, I grieved for all the years I'd spent believing their version of my worth. The next morning brought clarity. I woke up feeling different, lighter somehow, as if speaking my truth had released some weight I'd been carrying without realizing it. I made coffee, sat on my tiny balcony, and made a list of things I wanted to change. First, I was done with family dinners, where I performed the role of the grateful, undemanding daughter while Emma basked in attention and praise. If they wanted to see me, they could invite me specifically, not just assume I'd show up to fill out the table. Second, I was done making excuses for their behavior to other people. When friends asked about my family, I'd been conditioned to paint a picture of loving parents who treated their daughters equally. That performance was over. Third, I was done accepting scraps and calling it love. If they wanted a relationship with me, it would be based on genuine interest in my life, not just my ability to support Emma's dreams. The first test came sooner than expected. Tuesday afternoon, my mother called, her voice carefully controlled. "Your father and I would like you to come to dinner Sunday. We need to discuss this situation as a family." "What situation?" I asked. "This misunderstanding about how we've treated you and Emma." "There's no misunderstanding, Mom. There's a pattern of favoritism that's been documented over 23 years. Sarah, please. You're family. We love you. We just want to work this out." The old me would have heard love and immediately capitulated. The new me heard manipulation wrapped in familiar words. "If you want to work this out," I said, "then we need to have an honest conversation about the choices you've made and how they've affected me. Not a family dinner where Emma gets to play victim and you get to pretend this is all a big misunderstanding." Silence. "I'm willing to meet with you and Dad, just you two, to have a real conversation. But I'm not coming to dinner so you can gang up on me and make me apologize for having feelings about how I've been treated. We would never gang up on you." "Mom," Emma called me jealous and bitter for pointing out factual differences in how you treat us. Dad called me dramatic and ungrateful. That's not exactly creating a safe space for honest conversation. Another pause. Longer this time. "What would you need from us?" she asked finally. "To feel comfortable talking about this?" The question surprised me. In 23 years, I couldn't remember either parent asking what I needed. "I need you to acknowledge that there's been a significant imbalance in how you've treated Emma and me. I need you to listen to how that felt from my perspective without immediately defending your choices or minimizing my experience. And I need you to understand that this isn't about jealousy or sibling rivalry. This is about fundamental fairness and respect." She was quiet for so long I thought she'd hung up. "Okay," she said finally. "Your father and I can meet with you, just us, this Saturday, if that works for you." After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone in disbelief. Had my mother just agreed to have the conversation I'd been waiting my entire life to have? Or was this another performance, another way to manage me back into compliance? There was only one way to find out. Saturday morning, I prepared like I was going into battle. I printed copies of my financial analysis, gathered photos that illustrated the disparity in our treatment, and wrote down the key points I wanted to make. I wasn't going to let emotion derail this conversation or allow them to gaslight me into believing my perceptions were wrong. We met at the same cafe, where my mother and I had talked earlier that week. My father arrived wearing his courtroom expression, the one that suggested he was already building his defense strategy. My mother looked nervous, fidgeting with her purse strap and avoiding eye contact. "I'm not here to attack anyone," I began, placing my folder on the table. "I'm here because I love this family and I want to understand how we got to a place where one daughter receives hundreds of thousands of dollars in support while the other gets $20 gift cards." My father leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "Sarah, you're an adult. You're successful. You don't need our financial support anymore." "Dad," I said, keeping my voice level, "this isn't about needing money now. This is about understanding why Emma's needs have always been prioritized over mine, why her achievements are celebrated while mine are taken for granted, why she gets investment in her future while I get lectures about self-reliance." "You've always been the strong one," my mother interjected. "Even as a little girl, you were so capable, so independent. Emma needed more guidance, more support." "What if," I said, opening my folder and pulling out a photo, "I wasn't actually stronger? What if I just learned that asking for support was useless because I watched what happened when Emma asked versus when I asked?" I slid the photo across the table. It was from my high school graduation, me standing alone in my cap and gown, while in the background, Emma was surrounded by relatives congratulating her on making varsity soccer. "I graduated valedictorian that day," I said quietly, "with a full scholarship to state, the biggest academic achievement in our family's history. But all anyone could talk about was Emma making varsity as a sophomore." My parents stared at the photo, and I saw something shift in my father's expression. I pulled out another photo, this one from Emma's community college graduation. The restaurant was packed with extended family, flowers covered every surface, and Emma glowed in the center of it all. "This was last year," I said. "Emma graduated with a 2.8 GPA and no job prospects. But look at this celebration. Look at how proud everyone is. How much effort went into making her feel special." I pulled out one more photo, this one from my college graduation dinner. 4 people around a table at a chain restaurant. My achievement gift card sitting next to my water glass like an afterthought. The contrast was undeniable. My father cleared his throat, a sound that had intimidated me since childhood, but somehow felt smaller now. The photos lay spread between us like evidence in a trial, and for once, he seemed to be the one without words. "Sarah," he said finally, his voice lacking its usual authority, "we never meant to make you feel less important." "But you did," I replied simply. "Every birthday you forgot, every achievement you dismissed, every time you told me to be grateful while showering Emma with praise and presence. Impact matters more than intent, Dad." My mother reached for one of the photos, her fingers tracing the edges like she was seeing it for the first time. "I remember this day," she whispered, looking at my high school graduation picture. "You were so proud of that scholarship." "I was," I said. "I was 17 years old and I just earned a free ride to college. I thought you'd be proud too. Instead, you spent the reception talking to Aunt Linda about Emma's soccer season." "We were proud," my father insisted, but his voice wavered. "We've always been proud of you." "Then why didn't you show it?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Why didn't a single person at that graduation party congratulate me? Why was my biggest achievement treated like background noise to Emma's sports schedule? My mother was crying again, but these tears felt different. Less performative, more raw. Because Emma needed the attention more, she said so quietly I almost missed it. She was struggling with her confidence, with fitting in. "You were always so sure of yourself." I laughed. A sound without humor. "Sure of myself? Mom, I spent my entire childhood walking on eggshells, trying to figure out what I could do to earn the kind of love you gave Emma effortlessly. I wasn't confident, I was desperate." The silence that followed felt like the space between lightning and thunder, that moment when you know something massive is about to hit. My father rubbed his temples, suddenly looking older than his 62 years. "We thought we were helping both of you in different ways. Emma needed more support to succeed. You were going to succeed regardless." 3 years later, I finally understand that worth isn't something you earn through achievements or lose through neglect. It's something you claim for yourself. Emma still drives that Tesla, but I drive something better now. The knowledge that I deserve more than gift card scraps. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't what your family gives you, but what you learn to give yourself when they can't.